Welcome to Relationship Equity, a podcast that explores how successful people cultivate meaningful connections with others in their personal and professional lives. Learn from the stories, insights, and advice of leaders, innovators, and influencers who have built strong bonds with their teams, their customers, their communities, and their families. Here's Richard Walker.
I'm here again with Barry Conchie. We've been diving into his new book, The 5 Talents That Really Matter. We've also explored the critical differences between leadership and management, and why 80% of managers aren't fit for their roles, and the traits that set exceptional leaders apart. Barry, I'd like to revisit a couple of things you mentioned in part 1. You mentioned having air coverage from others when you weren't at your best. What motivated them to protect you? And this ties into a broader question about introverts and extroverts in leadership. There's a common belief that great leaders must be extroverts. What's your perspective on that, Barry?
Well, I think, let me deal with your first question first, because, you talked about air cover and, why they might have done that. I think people gave me air cover because they saw something in me that they didn't see in other people. I had a pretty sharp brain. I wasn't shy in expressing my opinions, but I was very much a data guy, very much the person who looked at research, looked at evidence. And I think certain types of people might be attracted to that. And certainly when I talk to the CEOs and the executives that we work with today, they see that value in the work that Sarah and I lead in our business, because we're very direct, very forthright, but we don't say things we can't back up. I'm not a think tank. We don't just come up with interesting ideas. And, I'm certainly not a Simon Sinek who, is as far away from research as it's possible to be. I'm very much looking at the data and saying this is what we found. So I think people find that attractive. But getting back to your question about relationships and the idea that extroverts are more likely to be seen as potential successful leaders than introverts, I think it's nonsense, and the data shows it. If we had a cookie cutter, to use an American phrase, for leadership, by definition, it would be wrong. And the thought experiment that reveals that is fairly simple. As people listen to this podcast, I'd like everybody to think of people that they've worked with in the past. Now, I hope everybody listening to this, exceptional manager, exceptional leader, I hope they have. The chances are you've worked for a variety of different leaders. But here's the one thing that all exceptional leaders have in common. They are substantially different from each other. They achieve their success in very, very different ways. Well, there isn't a cookie-cutter approach to leadership. What we talk about in the 5 talents that really matter isn't that you need to do these specific things. It's that successful leadership is the consequence of a constellation of talents. And we want people to think of leadership talent as a constellation. And the configuration of those star qualities for you, Richard, are going to be very different than they are for me. And both of us could be predicted to have a high chance of success in our role. So when we might look at, 3 candidates for a CEO job. So we might be talking to a board, and a board is looking at 3 candidates. We evaluate them all. They all might have a strong prediction. But when we slice and dice the characteristics that contribute to that prediction, we might find that one CEO is fantastic at turnarounds, but another CEO might be brilliant at sustaining and maintaining high performance over time. And another one, for example, just might have a strong internal operational focus as a leader, which tends to be favored in private equity groups. So the idea of there being a cookie cutter is a nonsense. The idea of making claims that extroversion is more likely to lead to success than introversion, the data doesn't support it.
Let me tell you a little story. This young man went to college in California, and he did a mechanical engineering degree. After his first semester, this young man said to me, "I can't hang with these kids. They're far more intelligent than I am. I think I'm either going to come back to Minnesota, or at least I'm going to try something different." I said, "Oh, well, all right, that sounds good." Now, I played golf with this young man and a very senior executive at one of our clients, 3M. And he told this other fella, the friend of mine, that's a COO at 3M, he told him the same thing. And this fella said to him, "Don't you dare." Grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. He said, "Figure it out. Stick with it, kid." And he listened to the other fella. He didn't listen to me. Now, this is very early. This is in literally his first semester. And he stuck through that, through 4 years. And at the end of the 4 years, he ended up being the team leader of 14 other young adult kids that, according to this young man, were far more intelligent than him, but he ended up being the leader of that group. And now he's gone on to, and after that, he went on to do some unbelievable things in his career. And I would never have seen that. I would never have believed that, but I saw it happen with my own 2 eyes. Now, the reason I tell you that story is because if you were to take 100, 1,000, or however, a big number, can you predict based on your analysis, based on your research, based on everything that you've done, the likelihood of other kids in a similar, because as you well know, it can take one word from a given individual, it can change your trajectory, change everything about your life. I go back to people in my life that have influenced me, and it's completely changed everything about my life with the advice that I took from them. And we get advice from all different kinds of sources. But could you have predicted that based on your research that that kid would have been able to be in a leadership role, especially when he was so intimidated that he didn't deem himself anywhere near as intelligent as the others? So I guess my overall question is there a system that can truly predict leadership early in people's lives? That's a lot of words thrown at you.
No, I wouldn't be confident at all. And the reason for that is the malleability of the brain, the developing brain, which doesn't really start to settle down and, develop permanence until the mid-20s, would make that task almost impossible. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't do some broad-based determinations. So out of 1,000 people, could we predict, that we could pick 20 out of 500? We could probably do that. Because, some behaviors, do become stronger as we get older, and you sometimes see these characteristics in young kids. I often meet people who've got, very, very small toddlers at home. And I say, "How many have you got?" And they say, "Well, I got 2 of them." And I said, "I bet they're both identical, aren't they?" And they say, "Oh my goodness me, chalk and cheese," Those kinds of very distinctive, broad categorizations tend to permeate through life. So the competitive kid who cried because they came second in the egg and spoon race might not cry in their 30s, but they certainly feel the sense of loss. So characteristics like that, very dominant, distinctive characteristics, tend to have a degree of permanence as youngsters progress into teenagers, then into adulthood. But if we were to apply assessments during, that kind of variability in the brain, so as the brain is changing, as it's developing, we could argue that it's hardening, it's becoming more rigid and more form. We wouldn't be confident in making those kinds of predictions. Now, I'll give you 2 ways of thinking about this. We have what we call a professional associate assessment. And professional associate assessment is a fantastic predictor of good work behaviors in people coming straight out of college and going into work. But we're measuring general good work characteristics like, do you team well with other people? Do you want to do the right thing? Do you need supervision, or can you be trusted to do things on your own? So they are actually quite general characteristics. But our assessments that are aimed at more mature people who might have been in work for, say, 5 or 10 years, they are way more specific, way more narrow, because, we're more confident that we can identify those things and find those things. With our leadership assessment, we actually have a pretty strict rule. We refuse to assess people below the age of 28. You might say, why? Well, maybe a 28-year-old, it's too young for them to be thought of as a leader. And you might be right. The reason that we have for not doing it is we pick up far more variable results in people below the age of 28. And that means we can't make an accurate prediction. We can only make a generalized prediction. So if I interview a 26-year-old on our top level exec assessment, I might get it 60% right. But if I interview them above the age of 32, I'm at 80%. Now, I don't ever want to say that we are so hardwired in the brain that nothing can change. But we are picking up on predictable characteristics at the level of the brain that don't actually change that much over a significant period of time. So when we do things like test, retest, analysis of our assessments, within a year of taking our top level leadership assessment, our test, retest number is 0.92. So that means that very, very small amount of change in the way that a person responds after a year to how they responded a year prior. And at 5 years, it's 0.84, which shows a remarkable consistency, over quite a long period of time. So we take that kind of work really seriously. And I would never try to assess teenagers, period. I know there are companies out there that do it and encourage people to do it. We would never do that.
I get it.
We're concerned with exceptional outcomes. We're concerned with exceptional performance. We're just not that confident we can detect it in youngsters.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do it.
I think it's very, very difficult to do as well because it's I think this is my opinion for what it's worth. We all have natural traits, characteristics based on a number of different factors, where we grew up, influences and what have you. And I want to go back to something you said way back, and because it brought a flash into my mind of a teacher that had so much influence on me. And when you get older, you get to our age now, you want to go back and thank those people. And I've tried, and it's very difficult for me to do because I'm not a social media guy, and I can't track it. But I've got to track down this one particular fella. He was called Mr. Philip Sant. He was my PE teacher. The guy was just so inspiring, and he encouraged me, because where I grew up, I was either supposed to stay in farming or go into one of the local factories or go into the trades. And I did. I went into the trades. I was a bricklayer for the first 7 years of my working life. But he always encouraged me to do a lot more. And he put this belief in me. I wouldn't believe what he was telling me I should believe. And he didn't, the light bulb never really went on. Just a million things happened for me to end up where I am today. But there's those people that inspire us in our lives that, for those listening, go back and thank them. If you can find them, go back and be sincere about it, because there are those people, to your point, there are so many people that shouldn't be in the jobs that they're in, but there are those exceptional people that will change many, many lives for the better, and they should be thanked. They should be recognized. So I just wanted to say that.
About 3 months ago, Richard, I got an email out of the blue. And, sometimes when you look at an email address, you can't really pick out who it is that's contacting you. And I get a lot of those emails, and I usually just delete them if I can't recognize them. I get so many emails, it's crazy, and I just delete them. Anyway, something in me told me I'm going to open this one because there was a name in the email, the surname, and I recognized it and thought, oh, okay. I clicked on it, and it was my 96-year-old primary school teacher when I was 10 years of age. And still alive, obviously. And I had the opportunity to do exactly that. Because let me tell you something. I wasn't the best student at school. I was smart, but I was lazy. And she was just this inspirational woman who I'd do anything for. And if it hasn't have been for her, I wouldn't have passed my exams to get to grammar school. I did. And if it hadn't have been for her, I wouldn't. And if I hadn't have passed my exams to grammar school, I'd have probably been a painter and decorator like my dad. And, no shame in that. He was a very proud man. But my life trajectory was completely changed by her. I'm running a company now in the US that's doing top-level consulting with companies around the world. And if it hadn't have been for her, I'd have been painting doors for windows in houses and hanging wallpaper in bedrooms. So, I think you're absolutely right. There are these people who have this enormous impact. Now, the more interesting question to me is, why did they pick you? Why did they focus on you? Now, obviously, it wasn't just you. But you felt that focus. And, it's often intrigued me. What is it in some people that enables them to see certain glimmers of potential in others and then invest their time very, very heavily? And I came to this conclusion, and this might be the explanation for the guy who saw that potential in that kid that you didn't see, when he became one of the great leaders and the rest of it. My guess is that he focused on quite a few people, but most of them didn't get there. And I've come to that conclusion about great teachers, that they didn't just focus on you and me. Clearly, they had a class of 30 kids. Well, I think they probably applied extra energy to quite a few people. We just didn't see it, but we felt the benefit of that focus. And then, from that attention of the teacher, maybe there are a tiny number of the people who receive that focus are able to benefit from it and rise up. So that certainly intrigued me. But the idea of thanking people for what they've done to your career, I think it's really, really important. Really
Not just career, but I mean, life. A career is a big part of our life, of course. But I mean, there are certain people in everybody's life that will positively impact their world forever. Now, let's just take it, from what we're talking about here. You said something a long time ago I want to go back to, and that's that you found yourself naturally migrating to top performers and just kind of ignoring the rest. I've always done that. And it's not a conscious thing, it's a subconscious thing. I always might, not necessarily top performers, but people that they have something different, something special than all the rest. And it's either a drive or it's they think differently. I've always naturally migrated to those people. And it's not the rest are not good at what they do, but there's those people within human dynamics that we naturally migrate to, whether it's in the business world, your professional world, or your personal life. And that human dynamic is fascinating to me, and I'm not sure it can be quantified or predicted. But when you find those people that think don't necessarily think exactly the same way that you do, they might challenge you. I mean, some of the people I work closest with, they'll challenge my thinking. My retired business partner, brilliant man, very different skill set than me, which is why we worked so well together before we retired about 10 years ago. But he would stare me in the face and argue with me about something I felt strongly about. But he also agreed with me. He just wasn't going to tell me, because he wanted to really determine, did I really feel that strongly about it? Was I willing to really defend my position on something, or would I fall if he challenged me? So having those people in your life and in your world is so important, because in my opinion, you grow when you've got people around you, your circle of influence, the people around you, if they challenge you, challenge the way you think, challenge what you do, challenge you to achieve things that you don't even think you're capable of doing. I go back to the building site when I was a young man, and people would say to me then, "What the hell are you doing here, man? You should be doing something different. You don't belong with us." And I didn't understand it. I got defensive. I remember I worked in the youth club, and the youth leader would say, "Why the hell are you? You need to do something completely different." I didn't get it. Did not understand at all. I said, "I'm a damn good bricklayer." He said, "I'm sure you are, but you need to do something different." And I didn't get it, because other people saw things in me I didn't see myself. And I pride myself on doing the same thing now with youngsters. A program that we have called the Emerging Talent Program is fascinating. We'll talk about that another time, Barry. But it's so incredible when you can see things in others they don't see in themselves, and you help get them on a path to achieve things that they don't even know they're capable of. That's that's a pretty cool deal.
Well, Richard, let me just address that earlier point that you made. You talked about you naturally gravitated towards the top performers. It was like a subliminal thing. It wasn't something that was conscious. You just found yourself doing that. What I thought was really interesting is that when you switch that to being intentional, it becomes really powerful. And I think I realized I wasn't a great manager at the same time that I recognized that an intentional switch towards focusing on really good people and helping them get world class was going to deliver far better performance than trying to fix a broken contributor. And I realized I wasn't a very good manager because I was impatient with people who didn't perform very well. And then I had this stupid idea that I could fix them. If ever you want to realize the limits of human potential, uh, try to fix a person who shouldn't be in the job that you're looking at. There's a reason, by the way, why I'm not behind a hotel check-in desk, because I'd last one shift, maybe not even one shift, but I'm not taking it from a grumpy traveler who's had a delayed flight. I'm sorry. When you show up at my desk, I'm going to check you and you're going to shut up and you're going to give in your key, get up to your room, and I'd be fired immediately after the first customer and right the start. Okay. So there are limits. And by the way, sending me to a Swiss charm school is not going to fix that issue. So I think it was the realization of that that contributed to my understanding about myself as a manager. And then it was at the same time I kind of flipped to say, well, I can't be bothered with that. So clearly I'm not a very good manager. I'm going to focus on a couple of people over here. And I had the best time ever. But the people over here hated me, didn't like me at all. I made it perfectly clear. Of course, as you can tell, that traumatized me, that I wasn't liked by poor performers. And of course, after that, I quickly recognized I need to get out of this, off this ladder and get on a different ladder pretty quickly.
Yeah, believe me, I resonate with everything that you said. TED Talk. If you could do a TED, you haven't done a TED Talk, Barry, have you?
I've said no every time.
Have you really? Why is that?
I think it's a little bit like intellectual tourism.
How so?
It's for the same reason that I'm not on the speaking circuit.
Right.
I'm not entertainment.
Right.
I don't regard myself as entertainment. I don't want to show up in an organization, wow them with a wonderful speech about this, that, or the other, and then leave them. My relationships with is that I work with, in some cases, are over 25 years. And I've gone through several CEO changes. We kind of stick around because the stuff we do works. And I'd rather work with interesting people on engaging projects than be on the speaker circuit where I prostitute my skills for short-term benefit with an audience that's never going to see me again. And so, that doesn't interest me at all. There's no part of my business that makes me want to do that. Now, I've got some respect for people on the speaking circuit, but not a lot. And the reason for that is I don't think you create impact in organizations by dangling, who might be a brilliant speaker, by the way, dangling a brilliant speaker in front of my organization, because all the hard work's afterwards and they're not around to help you with it. You've got to try and figure it out. I'd rather be shoulder to shoulder with the people I work with, helping them figure it out. So sure, I can stand on a stage, I can entertain people. I'm pretty self-deprecating. I'll tell a few jokes. I always say when I go to the northern states in winter, whether it's Fargo in North Dakota or whether it's Minneapolis or places like that, I said I was brought up in a household in Yorkshire in England, and we didn't have central heating. It was freezing in winter, and I used to say to my dad, I'm cold. I can't sit down and concentrate on my homework. And he said, go and stand in the corner. It's 90 degrees over there. I brought my humor with me, so I can entertain people, and I can make them laugh, and I can make them understand all the principles we talk about. It does nothing for me.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not on the circuit either.
They walk off a stage and all they want is adulation and the applause.
Yeah.
Right? Not interested.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. We brought in a marketing company. They're very, very good, and I was encouraged to do the circuit thing, and I felt exactly the same way that you did. I had because it is performing. Now, could I have shared things that people would listen to? Maybe. But you can do that easily. You can find it yourself. But I felt the same way and feel the same way that you did, that's just not my thing. Now, I will say I do watch TED Talks, and you mentioned Simon Sinek earlier, and I am inspired by, he changed our game with his golden circle. But I also believe strongly in data and research and backing things up, which is why I'm very intrigued with your work, because you back up your claims with real data. There's opinions and there are facts. Now, I listen to opinions because, this my father worked in the same factory over 40 years. He's the wisest man I know, Barry, and I don't just say that lightly. I mean that, and I'm not the only one that thinks that way. My kids do. Everybody in his circle, because he thinks differently, and he's not trying to impress anybody. But if one of his brilliant words of wisdom is, for every given expert that claims one thing, there'll be another expert will claim the exact opposite. Now, which one of those experts is correct? The one that's got the data to back it up, the real data, and not skewed data to try and prove a theory because that's the other thing with data as well, right? If somebody's trying to sway people or influence them in one direction, they can create data. Now, let's go back to the profiling, because profiling, we all have a profile. We all fit a box of some kind. But to your point earlier, there's no two people exactly alike. A lot of us have got very similar traits, but there are no, and maybe there are clones, but there's no two people exactly alike. But profiling, we all want to profile, and I've hired thousands of people over the years, and we've used profiling, and I'm a certified DISC instructor. I have been for 20 years, and I find that kind of stuff fascinating. However, there are some people that can game the system. Very clever people can game it. And if with your research and with your business and what you do you find people that try and or they'll learn this? These are the traits, these are characteristics. This is the profile of companies looking to hire. I know what they want, therefore I'm going to try and game this system to give them what they want to hear. Do you see that happen?
We don't. And I think there are a couple of reasons for it. One is that the questions that we ask don't obviously lead to a characteristic trait or disposition that the person thinks is desirable. One of the elements that we measure in top leadership is competitive instinct. And that's essentially an external and comparative dimension of leadership. And it's not important in all leadership roles, but it helps us understand the leader a little bit more, if they're either strong in competitive tendencies or weaker in competitive tendencies. We use the word competitive or competition 6 times across a long interview. None of those occasions tracks to the competitive thing. So if a person tried to game our system, they'd get it wrong. The second thing is we carry out what we call internal consistency checks. So we know from the voluminous data that we've got that there are certain patterns of response across variable questions. So we know, for example, if a person says, for the sake of ease, yes on this question, there's about a 98% chance consistency-wise they should say yes on this question. Now, if you're gaming the system, you can't hold those constructs consistently in your mind when you're being bombarded with over 100 questions, which is what we do. So if we find somebody who says yes over here and no over here, then consistency bells go off in our system and we start to look for other patterns, and it becomes very easy to spot somebody who's trying to game the system. Now, if you step back for a second, Richard, it's impossible for those people to be ever recommended for a role because they've failed a basic integrity test. I mean, they're cheating. They're lying about themselves in order to persuade somebody else that they should be considered for a job. We put them bottom of the pile. We put a big red flag over their profile and we wave it strongly. I think the other thing is, some of these characteristics around ethics are not that difficult to predict. And, we've got certain patterns of questions in our assessment that helps us understand the kind of ethical foundation of people. My father gave me some very good advice when I was a kid. And it was on one of those occasions when I was late home and I shouldn't have been. I was probably about 12 years old, right? And I should have been home at 5 o'clock and I was home at 5:30 covered in dirt because I'd been out playing with my friends. And he said, "Why are you late?" And I told a lie, trying to pretend that there was some ulterior reason as to why I was late, as opposed to my own bad behavior and being inattentive of the time. And he sat me down and he said, "Look, son, I'm going to give you some advice. If you're going to be a liar, for the rest of your life, make sure you've got an extremely good memory. Because you might not realize, but you told me that story a month ago and I didn't believe you either. It stuck with me. And I often think about that in professional settings, that if you are going to be dishonest, have an exceptionally good memory. An example being, let's say you're in work and you stretch the truth in a conversation with some colleagues over here, but then say something completely different in a meeting over here. We know what's going to happen. And that was my father's point, that, fantastic liars have got exceptional memories. They remember what they told to who and when, and they can maintain that fiction across their lives. I probably think that's why prisons are full. But from my perspective, it's not difficult to detect. And therefore, I learned that lesson very young.
Yeah, my belief is, even if you got an exceptional memory, people will flush you out at some point. You're not going to you can't remember every single thing. They will flush you out. I could keep on talking for 4 hours here with you. We have a very weird overlapping background, and I can't wait to follow up with you. But we're at time now, and I want to ask you to leave us with something that you'd like to leave the listeners with that we've not discussed, or something that they can, something that would be something that people want to hear about what you've learned in your life and your successes. You've obviously impacted countless lives positively. What's the one last thing you want to leave people with, Barry?
I think everybody's got the capacity to be brilliant in some areas. And, the pursuit of your life should be trying to find what that is for you. Some people are lucky and they find it early in their career or early in their life, and they have the most fulfilling experience that anybody could ever wish for. Don't persist in a job you don't like. Find out as much about yourself as you possibly can, because there is a U-shaped hole somewhere out there. And when we sit down with leaders that don't come through our assessment and they don't get appointed to leadership jobs, even though they tell us they want that desperately, we've often sat down and said, have you considered this? And then we have the most fantastic conversation possible, because, of course, they hadn't considered this, but the mere mention of it gets them excited. And, I think that if we want every person on this planet to feel fulfilled in the kind of choices that they make. And you don't achieve that by getting jobs that aren't a good fit for you. It just doesn't work, because, to your point, we might talk about life more broadly, but work's a big part of that. If you're not happy at work, you're generally not happy in life. And we want people to feel fulfilled and positive and the rest of it. So do not tire in looking for that U-shaped hole, because it does exist. It just might not be the job you're in now.
Some of the most simple things are the most profound. This was a sister of somebody I played cricket with, and I was probably 20 years old. And she said, here's how I look at it. We spend a third of our lives doing what we want, a third of our lives sleeping, and a third of our lives working. Why the hell not do something that you really enjoy for that third of your life when you have to work? It's so simple, it's stupid.
I just think it's a pursuit, and none of us should tire of pursuing it, of trying to get that.
Barry, I can't thank you enough. We're gonna follow up and continue our conversation. It's been a wonderful last hour with you. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it too, Richard. Good to talk to you.
Cheers.
This has been Relationship Equity. If you want to take your career, your business, or your personal relationships to the next level, reach out to Richard at yorksolutions.net. You can also get Richard's book, Relationship Equity, your cornerstone investment to great gains in business and life, on Amazon now. Relationship Equity with Richard Walker is a production of Forbes Books.